Hello and welcome to the Bougie and Backpack podcast. I'm Mackenzie from Travel Mackenzie, and I'm here today with Scott Kiesling, who is a life and relationship consultant with over 34 years of experience in the film industry and a decade of dedication to helping individuals and couples live their best lives. So through his innovative adventure therapy approach, Scott transforms lives by guiding people from the edge of uncertainty to leaping into the best version of themselves with unshakable self-love and confidence. And he was a speaker at our January summit where he spoke about how adventure travel transforms your life. So welcome, Scott.
Hey, Mackenzie, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you on the path to what you are doing now?
Sure. So it really, it started with fear. And I talk about that a little bit at the summit. You know, the idea that our culture, our parents, our caregivers, right, our teachers, all kind of prepare us for the world in a fear-based manner and not in this adventurous manner that I feel like is our true self, right? If we think about ourselves when we were little kids, an adventure in the woods, an adventure in our closet, right? Playing spaceship right? That was exciting. And I feel like as adults, that excitement has gone to fear. And so for me, adventure is really switching that, right? And turning that fear into excitement. And so one of my first big experiences was leaving my hometown to go to North Carolina and work in the film industry with nobody that I knew. I didn't know a soul. And I got this little job and I packed my little car and I was extremely fearful, right? I was 18 years old. I had really never been out of my town except for like a couple camping trips with my family. And this fear was going to stop me from possibly a career that I was actually in for 34 years, right? And so for me, switching that idea, switching the story that I was telling myself about what was fear and what was excitement, created this adventurous spark to travel. And that is what really led me to open my climbing gym, start a guide service, take people on retreats, is to be able to share that gift for us to get back to that childhood excitement. That to me is what adventure travel is.
Yeah, that's really interesting and I think maybe a lot of people don't think about this, but I think I read somewhere, maybe it was the book, Brave Not Perfect, that fear is taught. It's like something that you don't have as a kid. You innately don't have fear. And, you know, sometimes it's valid, right? Like you don't want to run into oncoming traffic. You should be afraid of getting hit by a car or something. But a lot of times it's to protect you maybe from disappointment, things that are preventing you from doing the big things.
Yeah, for sure. I have a saying that we teach our clients about fear, right? When you really dive into it, if you take one of your fears, now danger, like you said, is a whole nother thing, right? Like stepping in front of a moving bus is very dangerous. There's no fear, right? It's danger. Fear, when you really dive into it, is false evidence appearing real. It's a story that we make up or someone else makes up that we believe is true about this thing, right? So, you know, I talk about traveling to Costa Rica and the fears that I had of, you know, spiders and heights and different being in a jungle, right? There's monkeys everywhere. And that fear, the story that would have stopped me from taking on trips that I go on, or the stories that my brain makes up or other people tell me, right? Like, oh, that's dangerous, or that's this, or that's this. But when you really dive into it, it's false evidence appearing real that most of us have not had that experience. It's an idea that we have about that experience. So when we step through that, when we step through what we know, right? We step through what we know to be true, we gain tremendous amounts of confidence, right? In that adventure. And so when we step through fear, right? We step through the idea that we're creating in our head, that creates excitement. We can switch that feeling, we can switch the idea that we have about it into excitement, and it leads us in a whole new direction.
Yeah. So you're 18 years old, you pack up, you're in North Carolina, starting this job. Can you tell us about this job? Because I saw a little sneak peek about what it's about. And I think I think people will find it really interesting what you were doing there.
So I was a high school dropout and worked in theaters in New York where I grew up. And I went back and got my high school diploma and started in theaters in New York City and worked my way into some television. And a fellow that I worked with was doing a show in North Carolina. And so he said, hey, meet me in Wilmington. I'd never heard of Wilmington. I knew Wilmington, Delaware, because it was close to New York.
Yeah.
And there was a big theater there. And so I actually drove to Wilmington, Delaware, and called the guy up and said, hey, I'm 2 days early. I'm on Main Street. And he was like, no, there's no Main Street. And anyway, I found out it was North Carolina. I drove down and ended up on a PBS television show about Thurgood Marshall. And at the time, I was a set builder. I was a carpenter. And over my 34 years, I have become a special effects coordinator and stunt rigger, which I've done for about 30 years. But again, missing that opportunity at 18 to allow fear to stop me would have created a whole different life for me. And I probably wouldn't have ended up in the film industry for 34 years.
Yeah. And it's like maybe you wouldn't even have thought of that as a job because there's some risk involved, right? Like it's not all safe all the time. Like you try to do your best to make everything safe, but there's always things that can go wrong. And even if you hadn't even taken that first step to even get there, then you couldn't have gotten to where you ended up being.
Yeah. And it's, I think there's several really big lessons that I learned in the film industry. Mm-hmm. One is that there's really no impossible. It doesn't exist. It exists in our mind, right? We put limitations on ourselves about what we can do, what we think we can do. And I also learned that you can find the calculated risk within what you consider to be fear, right? So if we're setting a building on fire or jumping off of the top of a building or whatever it is, it's not without calculation, right? We take lots and lots of precautions in everything that we do to be able to create what we see on the screen. And we do it as safely as we can. And like you said, it's not 100%. I was in an accident 6 years ago where I had a brain injury because of an explosion. Talk about changing your path of adventure. My adventure became walking from my front door to a car.
Yeah.
To get out, right? Just to walk 100 yards became an adventure. And so, again, it's the meaning we put on it, right? I could have sat there and put the what ifs. What if I don't get better? What if that? What if this? But what if I do? What if I put the work in? What if I create an adventure around this? What if I create excitement about the adventure around this and really see it that way? And there's the way that I see it, there's always good in everything that happens. And yes, I got blown up. I had a brain injury, right? I couldn't talk correctly. I couldn't walk correctly, but it changed the way that I see life. Mm-hmm. It changed the relationship between me and my wife to be 1,000 times stronger and deeper, right? It created a space for me to help other people who go through traumatic experiences, right? To change that mindset, because that's all it is. It's either the poor me mindset, and I'm going to sit here and listen to the doctors tell me that I'm only going to get 30% better, or I can create this adventurous mindset. And today, as you know, I'm 90% better. And I really, really put 100% faith in that it was my adventurous mindset, along with all the work, that got me to this place.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's difficult for people to wrap their head around how you can put yourself in that adventure mindset. So can you walk us through how to do it? I'm sure it's easier said than done, and maybe it takes practice. And once you practice, you can get used to it.
Yeah, and it does take practice, right? I've been practicing the way that I live for a very long time. So when I had that injury, did I miraculously wow, I have a great mindset about this and it's going to be great? No, right? I went through the exact same thing that every human would go through, right? I went through grief. I was mad, right? I lost my identity completely, right? My identity was this film guy, this guy that could create and do anything, And I did for 28 years at that point, 29 years at that point. It took everything from me. It took a good while and a good support group of people that believed the same thing I did, right? That it's not a life sentence. This isn't, no matter what anybody says, there's work that can be put in or people to be found that have healed from this, that can heal from this, right? And yes, it took a minute, right? Even with my practiced brain, it took a minute. What it takes is to realize, use your real eyes, which is in here, right? Realize that you're buying into a certain story, right? I'm from the film industry, so everything to me is like a visual story. So I can buy into this drama. I can buy into this sad, drama that nothing goes right and there's a black cloud and, the doctors are right and I'm never going to get better. This is how it's going to be forever. My wife's going to have to take care of me and I'm not going to be independent. I could go there. Easy, right? Anybody listening knows how easy it is to go to that place. When we use our real eyes, when we realize that we're there, right? And this is the biggest and first step to this process, is to understand that you're there, that you're in that place telling yourself that story, that you're not going to get better, that it's never going to be good. It's never going to be the same. It's all the negative self-talk that we create. If you can see it, if you can realize it and go, I'm in that place, right? Telling myself that story. The minute you say it, you have a choice. You have a choice to create a new story.
Mm-hmm.
You have a choice to believe something different, right? I said earlier, step through what you know, right? I knew I was messed up. I knew things were never going to be the same. I knew I wasn't going to walk the same again. I knew I wasn't going to speak the same again. Once I realized I was telling myself these stories, now it was my duty, my challenge, my opportunity to change that story.
Mm-hmm.
What if I do get better? What if I do find somebody that has solved this problem?
Yeah. It's really a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're being negative and only seeing the negative future. And I think something that's interesting too is that we hear a lot about manifestation, right? Like, waking up in the morning, saying daily affirmations, and maybe it gets made fun of a little bit. Like, it seems a little bit loony, but the opposite doesn't get looked down upon. Like waking up in the morning saying like, oh, my life is terrible, I'm not going anywhere. Like, that seems like almost like normal, right? Like, but if you say the opposite, it seems like you're like, whoa, why are you but really what it is you're telling a new story about yourself. You're trying to recreate the story. And so when you had talked earlier too about the stories about fear that you have, is there a way you can rewrite those stories about fear and turn them into excitement? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, and it's the same process, mm-hmm. right? It's realization that we're telling ourselves a story. The minute we can become aware that the story maker is not in control, right? That there's a bigger piece of us that actually has the control over choice. And we believe when we wake up on Monday and it's like Mondays are this or that. That's a story we tell ourselves, right? I'm grateful for every Monday I get to experience, right? Because I choose to have a grateful story, right? I choose to wake up and be grateful, whether I'm broke, whether I ran out of gas, whether I'm, sitting in a hospital bed. There's something to be grateful for. And again, when we realize the story we're telling ourselves, what narrative do you want, right? And the whole manifestation thing, it is the opposite story. That's all you're doing, right? If every day you wake up and it's like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that or this, or I'm going to, I'm always going to be broke, or I'm never going to have money, or I'm right? That's a negative story. If we change it to a positive story, right? I'm earning more money. I'm going to earn more money. There's more money coming to me. It is amazing what opens up in our world. And we can call it whatever we want. You can call it manifestation, right? Some people call it prayer. I believe in manifestation. I believe that our thoughts create what we see, right? We see what we be, okay? We see what we be. And when we change that be, when we change from that negative, and look, I've not always been like this. Believe me, I was a mess when I was young. I had tons of depression and I tried to commit suicide. And so I don't want anybody to think like that I'm just this happy-go-lucky guy that happens to speak this way and have a
you
great
have to
life.
learn it and practice it.
Man, it's a practice,
Yes.
right? And again, I've been practicing for a long time and I still find opportunities every day to practice gratitude, right? To practice empathy, to practice kindness, right? And to practice manifestation and see the benefits, right? And this is a game I love, right? Because you start talking about the things that really light you up, that excite you, right? We turn that fear, that negative self-talk into this positive excitement and adventurous self-talk. And then watch the evidence, but really watch for the evidence and point it out to yourself. Like, I talked about that 2 days ago. Look, right? And start with the little things, right? Start with the little things and watch it grow. And again, it's a practice, but it's that first step of realizing we're telling ourselves that story and then understanding that we have the choice to change that narrative to whatever we want.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about adventure therapy? What exactly is that, and how have you gotten into that? What have you created with adventure therapy?
So adventure therapy is something that I found out actually had been around since like the 1940s.
Oh.
Yeah. So I opened a climbing gym and I began to take people on retreats, like outdoor adventures, rock climbing, rappelling, that kind of thing, hiking, camping. And I found that when we were climbing and we were in this conversation about the fear that was going on, or I was literally talking them off of a ledge, I would find out later, right? They would come back and say, Scott, man, that conversation changed my life. I went home, and because of the confidence that you created on that ledge, I was able to talk to my wife and tell her something I never was able to say. I was able to go to my boss and ask for the raise, or get out of this job that I hated, or right. And the stories, they're endless. And I thought, wow, this is incredible that what I thought was just like this fun activity that we're doing, as we create this mindset together, it can change somebody's outlook, right? It can change the narrative that they're telling themselves and that they tell others about themselves. And so I was like, this is adventure therapy, right? This is what I love it. And so I created retreats around it. And somebody said to me, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years into it, 10 years maybe, they were like, well, I've heard about that before. And I was like, really? And of course, we jumped on the Google. And yeah, so the government used it for military to create a really great way of disrupting PTSD. And it works incredibly, right? I have friends that do it for the military who that's all they work with is veterans, and they do adventure therapy and they take them climbing and kayaking. The idea of being out there and doing these adventures, right? Whether you're in a wheelchair, missing a limb, right? That part, again, is limiting, right? When we go, oh, well, I can't because of. When we lose that story and you allow yourself to step through what step through the idea that you can't, right? Because I think it was Gerald Ford or somebody, and I don't remember who, but they said, like, whether you say you can or you can't, you're right. Right? Because it's that manifestation, it's that speech that we put out there, that vibration that creates what we see. So through adventure therapy, through the idea of adventure and the conversations that happen around adventure, it creates an opportunity for growth. It creates an opportunity for a new mindset shift. It creates the opportunity to step just a little bit past that comfort zone and allow that growth to show you that it's not that scary and that it can be done, right? And sometimes it's little tiny steps. Take me, for instance, right? I went from jumping out of planes, rock climbing, rappelling down waterfalls to hoping I could make it from my front door to a car in a driveway. So again, adventure doesn't have to be this giant thing. It can be something in your neighborhood. It can be something in your city, in your county, in your state, right? And it can grow from there. But the idea of adventure therapy is to really grow through adventure.
Yeah. I love that. I'm a climber myself. I'm not like one of those like crazy, like I do some outdoor climbing. I do some lead climbing. Me and my husband though, we both do it, and it's actually really fun too as like a couples thing, because you like belay each other. There's a lot of trust building involved. Just as a side note. But yeah, I've noticed too, like when I base trips that I do around adventure, it really creates a different experience. Like especially with travel. And it doesn't need to be far. Like there's a lot. I live in Northern Virginia, so there's a lot out here in terms of outdoor stuff that you can do. But yeah, can you walk us through like what kind of things you do on these retreats and these adventure trips that you do?
Yeah. So, the adventure starts the minute somebody books with us, right? Because there's going to be some fear around that. So we really coach people through the entire experience. Once we meet, a lot of times we work with single women. So it's the idea of traveling alone, right? This solo traveler. So there's a lot of fear that comes up with that, right? Especially for females. It's a different story when men are traveling alone and women are traveling alone. It's just how it is. So we really do coach on that. And then once you're in whatever country we're going to, you're with a group, right? It's not you by yourself, even though you're a solo traveler. So we have these incredible villas. We have private chefs. We really love the luxury part, even though we get our boots dirty every day. So every day there's an adventure, and those adventures are tied to the stories and the limiting beliefs that we have as humans, right? And so, they come up during the trip, and we know what they're going to be because this is what we do. So we know that there's going to be certain fears around hiking with monkeys literally right here on tree limbs or coming close to you. There's going to be fear around rappelling down a 100-foot waterfall. There's going to be fear about some of the food we might serve, right? We had one experience where the fear was about what they were wearing. We had a group of 10 women, and there were two very opposite women in the group. One was a farmer, and one was a model. And we were at breakfast, and we were waiting for the both of them, and we were going on a water part of this retreat. I think we were going whitewater rafting. And they both came down, and you could tell they were visibly like upset. So that creates conversation, right? That's an opportunity. So these two people had the exact same fear, right? Of what they were going to look like in a bathing suit in front of a group. Two completely different people, and in every way that you could imagine, right? So it's not just the adventures that we do. It's every conversation is creating this new mindset so that when we travel back home, the confidence, the self-esteem has all grown to this level that you've never been able to see before in yourself. And you get to take that back home forever, right? That's the gift of these retreats. You take that back home and everything changes in your life, right? The things that you want, you go after, right? There's no more limiting belief about you can't. I shouldn't say there's no more, they're there. But you have the tools, and the practice to step through that and to create something amazing. And every aspect of our adventure retreat creates that for the human, for the customer.
Yeah. And it sounds like also there's an element of community too, because I think you had said earlier too, a lot of these stories that you get are from stories that others have told you. And then you start creating these negative stories in yourself based on fear of stories that others have told you. But if you're in a group where you're all trying to work against that, you're all trying to create a sense of adventure and facing your fears, then you could walk away with I'm sure they all keep in touch after as well. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We have probably 30 WhatsApp app groups from all the different retreats and our Facebook group, and they all communicate all the time. They're constantly in touch with each other. They build lifelong friendships on these retreats. And the beauty is, again, we work with a lot of single women, and they invite each other to their weddings. They go on vacations together. They come back on retreats together. They really, really bond for life.
That's amazing. I love that. So your topic for the summit in January was about how adventure travel transforms your life. So can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek about what you talked about in your presentation and what people can expect to take away from your topic if they get the VIP goodie bag, which we'll have the link for that in the show notes if they want to be able to watch your video and the other videos we have in the summit after the fact. But yeah, what is your session all about?
Yeah, so it's really about how adventure can transform your life, right? And again, like we talked about here, it doesn't have to be these giant adventures, right? It doesn't have to be the 100-foot waterfall that you rappel down. It's wherever you start, wherever your comfort zone ends, is where that adventure can start, is where that excitement can begin to build. And that's really what the base of my talk is about, is that any adventure is an opportunity for growth because it shows us where we're limiting ourselves. And we all do it. It's human behavior, right? We've been taught it through our whole lives, through everything that goes on. The books we read, the teachers we have, the parents we have, everything, right? Little kid walks up a ladder. What do? We grab them and say, don't do that. Get down. They climb on the back of a couch, get down, right? Instead of teaching them to climb safely, right? And have fun with it. But it's really about the mindset shift to create an opportunity in your life that is more exciting and brings a smile to your face instead of the dread of every day, right? We can wake up every day and have an adventure. We did when we were 5. We can now. And it can be whatever you create, right? I was out cutting trees down. I live in Western North Carolina, up near Asheville. And so we've been cutting a lot of trees down. It's cold, it's snowing, it's wet, it's raining. I get up in the morning and it's like, I have an opportunity to go on an adventure. Or I have the opportunity to get up and go, oh man, it's cold and it's wet and I don't want to. And, it's a choice. And that choice can lead us from fear to excitement. It can lead us from dread to adventure. And it can take us on any journey that we truly want to go on.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's a great compliment to those who enjoy traveling and have the skills to, book budget travel, find the really good travel deals and stuff. But how do you use travel and adventure as a tool to transform your life so that every day you're living life to your fullest? I think that's a really good supplement to that.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for joining us today, Scott. If we want to find you on the internet, where's the best place to find you and learn more about your adventure therapy?
So scottandnancykiesling.com is our website, or you can find me on Facebook. You can Google my name, and everything comes up.
Awesome. Yeah. So we'll have the link for the Instagram in the show notes as well, so you can find Scott there. And thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a 5-star rating and a written review. We really appreciate that. It helps us to be able to figure out what kind of topics you enjoy on the podcast. And it helps us to be able to keep putting on our summit, which if you were not able to attend our January summit, we do have the link in the show notes for our VIP goodie bag, where you can watch Scott's presentation. You can watch all the other 20 or so presentations that we have for that summit. So thanks, and we'll see you next week.